What about the COVID turnaround from Facebook now? That COVID skepticism in terms of the origin of it. Have you had a look at this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're dropping their. This is, I think, going to be very revelatory to very many people. Hopefully, and I pray every day to Loki that this is going to make some people realize how duplicitous the overlords are.
Why?
Well, because to come in with global pandemic, you're coming in, you're asking, we're going to shut down the earth. You were going to shut down any discussion about certain aspects of this. Like, you should, if you question it, we're just going to lose your social media account, which is something very necessary for very many people, obviously. And now to be like, oh yeah, maybe we were wrong. It's just like, that's an enormous amount of power for people to have, and to assume that this power is being used reasonably or objectively has been demonstrated to be false.
Just to show that they don't have capacity. These people aren't the clairvoyant, all-seeing eye that they really need to be. The only way that you would be able to deploy this sort of a rule is if you were omnipotent and you knew, I know all of the facts and I can make the most educated decision. But when essentially what you had was people who knew more than the PolitiFact and the fact-checking organizations and Facebook and Twitter and such like, and they were penalized. As much as I hate Brian Rose, and I think the guy's a pleb, he has someone like David Icahn, and he talks about, I think it was 5G lizard people or whatever for him, but still, the skepticism about the origin of COVID was true, as much as it pains me to say that. But people were penalized for holding what now is actually considered to be a plausible, if not a realistic view.
And let's also talk about nuance. Let's suppose, okay, it's completely ridiculously and absurd and nonsensical that COVID was made in a lab in China. That might be factually true. But what is truthful is that governments, and I'm not saying this would happen in Antarctica, I'm just saying entities, are currently trying to bioengineer viruses. Like, that is a broader point that needs to be addressed rather than the specificity of this case. So you're doing this baby bathwater situation where you're saying, okay, you can't discuss this even as a hypothesis, but at base, there is a 100% certainty that things of this nature are being carried on all over the country by various governments. And you could easily make the case as something that's a good thing. If you bioengineer one, you can reverse engineer it, maybe cure diseases. It doesn't have to be nefarious. But what is nefarious is to kind of arbitrarily, as Mark Zuckerberg or as Dr. Fauci, who's one individual, draw the line and say, not only can you not discuss this, if you do discuss this, this is going to have great personal consequences for you. When it's something where it's not even a person has a vested interest in. It's not like I'm committing slander. I'm going online and saying Chris Williamson's this, and that. And you could see them coming in and be like, all right, we're not going to have our platform being used to spread literal lies that Chris did, so on and so forth. These are, if there's anyone who should not be given the benefit of the doubt, it's governments in general. And if there's any one government that should not be given the benefit of the doubt, it's the Chinese government.
Yeah, and there's no recourse either, right? You know,
Correct.
you lose your account or you're locked out of whatever for X number of months or weeks.
The recourse is having these entities be regarded with increasing skepticism and disdain, and creating alternative pathways to information flowing, which I think there's an enormous movement online from people who are much smarter than both of us put together to create these workarounds so this sort of thing can't happen in future.
Dude, every couple of videos has a comment from someone citing a new platform that I don't know about, that I need to upload my videos to. I've got a list of them. I've kept a list somewhere. It's like 5 or 6 other video hosting platforms. Oh, well, this one's decentralized. This one's on the blockchain.
Library's the one I think that everyone likes, or Odyssey.
Rumble,
Rumble's
I think
another one, yeah.
Told about. Well, look, there you go. There's 3. Yeah. There's 3 different platforms that we're talking about. But man, I remember the first conversation that me and you had about anarchism, and what you were talking about was the fact that how many times do you need to be hit over the head with a stick or mistreated by powers that be so that they show you that they do not have your best interests at heart,
right,
before you start to see that there might be something amiss here. And I don't know whether this is a quirk of my personality or whether it's a British thing. I think it's maybe both. British, I think, tend to be relatively orderly. We haven't rioted as much when things have occurred. There doesn't tend to be the revolts. That might be a chronic situation. It might just be an acute one for roundabout now with the way that the culture is at the moment. But for the most part, we tend to stick to the rules, and I've tended to respect rule makers and such like.
Sure.
But dude, the number of times since our conversation only at the beginning of this year where I see something, I'm like, okay, the mask slipped again there.
The
mask slipped again there. And it really is a red pill, because once you've seen it, you can no longer unsee it, and you start to see it more and more and more because the pattern recognition begins to kick in, right? That reticular activating system is so highly attuned that you start to think, well, I'm a little bit skeptical about that, and I'm a little bit skeptical about that. And then you have something as blatant as this COVID Facebook turnaround, and you go, well, this is just a big billboard saying we don't know what the fuck we're doing, and we make arbitrary rules, and you get punished when they're wrong, even if you were right before we knew, and we can admit that we were wrong, but you don't get any sort of recompense or apology.
And at a certain point, you ask yourself, wait a minute, why was I ever under the belief that Jeremy Corbyn, Sir Keir, Nicola Sturgeon, Boris Johnson care about me or have my best interests at heart when they've never even met me or know I exist? And to expect powerful people to not be self-motivated or self-driven makes no sense. At the very least, they're not going to be in that position if they do not have this hunger for power, because it takes so much work to get elected, especially at the highest levels. So even as a thesis, it's completely incoherent and nonsensical. Now, you can make the case, which is, I think, fairly easy to defend, that their careers would be best served when the country itself thrives, right? It's easy to get reelected when the economy is booming. It's much harder when things are a disaster. So they would want to seek out those policies that for the country. And I do think all those people do want, in general, probably what's best for, and they just have different views of getting there. But to say that they're entirely just motivated by service when you see how they talk, is just bizarre to me.
Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that, then press here for the full, unedited episode. And don't forget to subscribe. It makes me very happy. Peace.